The first reference to medicinal use of cannabis dates back to 2700 BC. It was subsequently recorded in the Pen Sao Qing, the pharmacopoeia of Emperor Shen Nung, the father of traditional Chinese medicine. Credited with having introduced the custom of drinking tea, Shen Nung recommended marijuana, for more than 100 ailments, including female weakness, gout, rheumatism, malaria, constipation, beriberi, and absent-mindedness. Shen Nung called Ma one of the supreme elixirs of immortality. If one takes it over a long period of time, one can communicate with spirits, and one's body becomes light. The Pen Sao Qing also advises, however, it could, in excess, make people see demons. Again, that's from the book written by Martin Lee. It's called Smoke Signals, A Social History of Marijuana, Medical, Recreational, and Scientific. Martin Lee now joins me in the studio. It is good to have you here.
Thank you very much.
Fascinating read, your book, and I was also fascinated about the knowledge we have and know about the use of medical marijuana almost 3,000 years ago.
It goes way back, and it's validated, incidentally, by the current scientific findings. When we go back to the 18th century in the United States, when cannabis tinctures were widely used as medicines, in the dispensatories, the medical dispensatories, officially of the U.S. government, in the late 1800s, also indicate that cannabis was useful for about 100 ailments. And so what the Chinese, in their wisdom, the wisdom of the ancients, knew back then somehow was confirmed later, and also confirmed by modern science, which indicates that cannabis is a very useful remedy for many, many different conditions, because the way it modulates the function of what's called neurotransmitters and receptors in the brain, turns out it affects many different physiological conditions. And this has been, this is not a theory, this has been validated by extensive, particularly preclinical research, but also studies involving human subjects.
You write that the ancestral home of marijuana is Central Asia.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
That's the foothills of the Himalayas, what's known as the Kush. That's where the marijuana plant, or the cannabis plant, as it's more widely known, has been identified as its origins. And it moved from there slowly because it was seen as a very valuable plant. It moved from culture to culture. And the interesting thing is, wherever it went, it was embraced by the culture. It became a point of controversy oftentimes, but it never left once it came to a place. Never has marijuana come to a culture and then been rejected. It always stays there and then moves on to another place. So it moved from the Himalayan foothills into China, over into Northern Europe, where those versions became more associated with industrial hemp for fiber and cloth and fuel and so forth, but also moved southward into India, and then across to Persia, to Africa. Ultimately, it was brought over on the slave ships.
On the slave ships?
Yes, the seeds.
To the Americas?
To the Americas, both to South America and to Mexico, apparently.
Jumping ahead of where I want to go, but tell me about that.
Well, the black captives who were brought over to the Americas brought with them important aspects of their culture that they could take with them, including seeds from many plants, but also from marijuana, which was considered a very valuable plant, used medicinally, but also for many other reasons in African cultures. And so when you had to choose something, you took those little seeds with you, and that's what ended up bringing marijuana to the Americas.
So we think it was with the slave trade, and probably first with the Portuguese.
First with the Portuguese to South America, to Brazil, but also their evidence indicates that black captives were brought directly to Mexico. I didn't write about that specifically in the book,
right,
but it's thought that in that context also the seeds came over. I think scholars understand that first the foothold that marijuana had in the Western Hemisphere was in South America. Then it slowly moved up South America through the Panamanian Isthmus and ultimately into North America. But it might have also come over from the slave ships that went directly to Mexico as well.
And you quote in your book Herodotus, who was claimed to be the first historian, as saying that the Scythians were howling with pleasure in hemp vapor baths.
Yes, they would use it almost like Native Americans today in the health bath, the steam baths, and The Scythians actually were a dominant cultural force in Europe, Northern Europe and in Asia for quite a long time, going back to 2000 BC. And they were charioteers and very aggressive culture. And they brought with them the cannabis from Asia to Europe. So that's the way it spread around.
And again, in the introduction, I quoted from your book, the quote from Shengnu, the Emperor of China from 2700 BC. Is that the oldest documentation that we actually have?
Not only is that the oldest documentation for cannabis use, but that's the oldest known medical text.
Oh.
Yes, so in that sense, it's pretty important and identifies marijuana as something that can confer longevity. And it's something that also validated, again, by modern science, because it's shown that marijuana literally down-regulates the production of stress hormones in the body. And we all know stress is bad for health. Less stress, you live longer. So again, somehow the ancients knew this. The wisdom of the ancients is not just a cliche. I don't know how they knew it, but a lot of what we are finding out today from the science confirms what people knew in ancient cultures many years ago.